Hey everybody, welcome back to the Nidus Anarchy series. I'm your host Adam, CIO and co-founder of Nidus, and today I want to do something a little different. I want to brainstorm with you live about how we would integrate AI with a modern LDAP. So this is probably the worst hook in all of podcast history because it's like I'm trying to pitch the idea of, hey, let's spend some time together talking about how can we take everything we know about AI and everything we know about LDAPs and merge them together. Like, what would be the use cases and how could we leverage AI to make LDAP better? So, I don't know. I mean, let's take the fundamentals, right? So, two main things of LDAPs that jump into my head. The first is that these are massive data storage things to hold a ton of information with the primary focus being on reading that data, right? So it's not meant for high volumes of writes, it's meant for high volumes of reads. Do we still need LDAP? Maybe that's a conversation we should have. Like, do we need it? I don't know. I mean, it's a data store of users that's constantly being updated. Now, everyone likes to use AD as their LDAP. I am not in that group for one very big reason. Once you extend your AD schema, you can never go back. And that to me is crazy. And I remember back during the Oblix days when we had all the OB attributes and everybody like, yeah, we're just going to put it into AD. And they've still to this day, I guarantee you, all those AD admins are now wondering why the hell there's all these archaic OB attributes all over their Active Directory that they can't do anything about. Then there was the whole Atom thing, the whole Active Directory, I don't know, add-on manager. I'm totally making up the term. I don't remember what it was called. But that kind of bolt-on LDAP where it's like, oh, it kind of queries into AD, but it's not. So really, it's just a data store of users that we want it to be able to look up super fast to do validation. So let's not even go down the route of should we even use an LDAP and should we replace it with something else? Like, does it really matter? And let's just go with the whole, how would we integrate AI with this? So the main thing that we use LDAPs for is data holding, binding to do credentials really is the biggest thing. And that's really it. It's just a massive data store that we pretty much just use to bind credentials against for SSO authentication. Mind you, I'm not saying that this is all LDAPs are used for. I'm saying in the identity and access world, when we have the pillars of information, what do we use an LDAP for as an engineer and architect? Well, if you throw that little barrel on that architecture diagram, I'm gonna be like, oh, you're gonna dump your users in there or a subset of them, and I'm gonna use that with my SSO tool to do authentication. And how am I gonna do that? Well, the SSO tool is gonna contact that LDAP and say, hey, look, here's a username and password, bind with it. Is it successful? If yes, correct password. If no, not correct password. That's the biggest thing. Other than that, yeah, does lookups maybe to get the email address or to look up user information when provisioning accounts, but those are very few and far between when things like that happen. The biggest thing is binding for user authentication. So, how could we leverage AI? I don't know if it would really be a leverage of AI directly. Like, if I were an LDAP manufacturer, I'm picturing like an assembly line of LDAPs, and I want to say, hey, now with AI, that's gonna be pretty brutal because like I think the only people that could do something like that would be a company like Radiant Logic, or a tool like Oracle Virtual Directory, basically the virtual directory companies that are out there where they extend an LDAP or make an LDAP a piece of something that is way cooler than just an LDAP and way more extensible and more dynamic. I think that's really the only way because then you could inject LDAP, you could inject AI to do kind of like risk detection and stuff like that, but why would you? Like, that doesn't make any sense. That should be in the orchestration layer during the authentication flow. LDAP is just a data source, should just return the data. So I really don't know how I would do it. Okay, you know what? Okay, I'd have to be desperate if I was an LDAP, be like, oh my gosh, how are we going to hang on to this new world and integrate AI into our LDAP? Okay, two things I would do right off the bat. The first is, and I don't even think this. I've thought about this already. I don't think this is going to be just an LDAP thing. I think we're going to see this everywhere. We're going to see this with every major enterprise software that comes out. And if they don't, they're totally missing the boat. So if you're not paying attention about the LDAP stuff to understand, this part's important. For all enterprise software moving forward, not only should when a client buys the stuff, should they get the software, should they get the license and the documentation and support if they buy it, whatever. There's another one that I think is going to be monumentally important, and that is the prompts. It should come with a document of massively specific prompts for that software that can be updated for their infrastructure and software and all that. So therefore, they can be like, "Hey, look, here's our new LDAP. Here's all the stuff you need to know and blah blah blah, all this traditional. And here's a prompt that will, or a set of prompts, or prompts plus an agent, maybe configuration. And with them, it will basically guide you through and installing and setting up and configuring this tool for your environment with whatever your requirements are. And you can write it however you want that's comfortable with you, but here's the format it's going to feed. And you put all this stuff in. Now that I think is going to be the future of software delivery for large complex stuff, right? Not, obviously not just like point and click next, but for the stuff where it involves multiple servers and all this other kind of things, it's in custom development that's going to have to go in there. Well, eventually, I'm telling you, it's going to be a prompt delivery. So then when I download it, I can be, okay, cool. And then I can just take this, plug it right into, let's say, Cursor or something. And that Cursor that has shell access, let's say, so that's why isn't there a good AI system with shell access? I've seen a couple, like, was it Ghosty or something? There's another one, but they're not really there yet. You know what I mean? I think like I'm waiting for that aha moment of a terminal that's AI ready, kind of like how Cursor and Windsurf forked off VS Code. So when someone can take terminal and flip that into an AI supercharged terminal, that's going to be rad. And I think the biggest thing in there, whoever's making this, safeguards, right? So there's got to be files, almost like a sudoers list, where you can give them their own kind of a shell, and they can run very restricted access, and they never have sudo access, or they need a biometric or something, so therefore it couldn't even accidentally get around it. Safeguards. That's kind of what I'm getting at here, right? So anyway, back to the LDAP thing. The installation instructions should come with the prompts, and those prompts will then have access to my shell, so it can SSH into other boxes to do things, the local system to be able to draw and integrate architecture diagrams, to read in the diagrams that I have, read in my infrastructure designs, read in the architectural design documents about the infrastructure and know everything. Give it some AWS credentials, and then watch that prompt just lead you through setting this whole thing up, verifying it, building the test cases. And the reason I say this is like, I know it's the future is because I'm already making it for our clients now. So I can't be the only one doing this, right? I mean, how awesome would it be if you could walk into a client site, if you're a vendor, and be like, hey, look, this whole set of prompts is going to guide you all the way through to setting this whole thing up, beginning to end. You don't have to know anything. You don't need to hire a whole team of developers and a whole team of engineers and all these other crazy things, because it's all here in this cool little prompt thing. And you can attach this, and here's our recommended LLM. So they'd be like, this has been certified to work on Claude 3.5 Sonnet New, OpenAI, let's say O3. It's just like when you're picking any other, it's crazy. It's almost like in the documentation and the requirements guide, you have the hardware requirements. You're gonna have the LLM requirements. Must be at least these models at these, like the 70 billion or more, to actually, these are the ones we've tested, and we can say, yes, this is good enough. This LLM will work. So you could use it locally, you could use OpenAI, whatever. That's going to be crazy when that happens, but that's definitely where it's going. Because like I was saying, when I'm developing software and I'm writing things on how to do stuff, I'm building out these whole prompt frameworks. So then I can just take, hey, look, we have a whole new client and we have a whole new suite of software we need to work on. Okay, cool. I'll spend hours building out the prompt that's going to feed into this framework of prompts I've already built that all work together. And then I use Windsurf to tack that on. And it reminds, I was just talking to a buddy of mine the other night. You know the meme where it shows like the stupid moron ogre looking dude? It's like a graph, right? This guy's like, oh, just prompt an AI. And then it goes up to the middle, and it's like, no, you got to do all this agentic framework and blah, 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 blah. And then it goes down to the Jedi, and he's like, just prompt an AI. I feel like I've reached that Jedi level now, because now my prompts, I'm kid you not, I'll get like a video and show you, but like my prompt literally is process prompt.text, enter. That's it. And then from that point, I actually, my mouse. So I have the little logic mouse so you can program the buttons to do different things. So I have this programmed as enter and I have this programmed as Y because of all the rules and everything else I got in place. It says, hey, should I continue? Y to continue. So I can just hit Y enter. So while I'm working, I can see cursor or windsurf, whichever one I'm playing around in, doing its work. And after it's finally gotten to a spot where it's waiting me to continue, I can just look over and two buttons and I'm back to doing what I'm doing. But it gives me the oversight and I can make sure it's not actually doing anything damaging. I can review the changes in the code and all this other fine stuff. But I think that's where we're going to be. I think we're going to have the documentation, the evolution of documentation is going to be these prompt delivery systems with minimal LLM requirements and, best practices on how to instantiate the prompts and things like that. It's going to be crazy, but I have a feeling that's going to be there because, like I said, we're doing that now for our clients and helping them out and being ready for this stuff. So therefore, we can, everyone will have access to the latest and greatest ways to implement their stuff in the securest way possible. So that's a whole nother talk that I should talk about, which is the security aspect of all this horrible software that's being written and put on the internet right now because of AI. That's going to be fun. Anyway, back to me being an LDAP manufacturer, stamping out all these LDAPs. So first thing I would do is I would start touting I'm doing LLM prompts delivery with my LDAP to help you configure, extend the schemas, install across your systems, work with you on your team to configure the best architecture for it, fine-tuning the system for latency, have it run through some tests and all that kind of stuff, build the test guides and prompts. I'd have all that delivered as prompts. So when I sell my LDAP, not only am I selling the LDAP, but I'm selling a whole nother set of services to help them save money for implementation and management and all those things too. So, and it just kind of gives me a little edge of a gimmick of like, oh, look, these guys are giving prompts as their documentation. It's like, that's just crazy. But then they're going to have that one engineer who's gonna be like, that's actually pretty amazing. So that's the first thing I do. So the first thing for AI integration to LDAP would actually just be these prompts that I would deliver along with the software and the documentation with the software licenses. So the next thing that I would deliver with the AI, it's going to have to be not really the LDAP itself, but more like, how we're just talking about LDAP is really just like a data store, holds massive amounts of data, right? And I was like, oh, well, we could use an LM to determine the risk and all this other stuff. And it's like, wait, no, that goes to the orchestration layer, blah, blah, blah. What if it doesn't? What if we actually heighten security in LDAPs so that it has all these extra features available to it without having to go external, because it has a local LLM that can reference and ask itself questions on or fine tune or learn and train as it goes. So right now, the common ideology is, okay, if I have an LDAP, then it sits behind a firewall and then it sits, that's in my data tier. And then I got my application tier and the web tier and the firewalls and the routing and all that kind of stuff. But those firewalls and the routing and all that kind of stuff, that is really the only line of defense for attacks on a company's LDAP system. So if I was a nefarious actor and I wanted to leech an LDAP, which is a huge treasure trove of information, right? It's generally an entire company's, all their employees, all their information, all their passwords, and sometimes they even have all their contractors. Sometimes they have all their customers and these things, right? So if you could do an LDIF dump out of a corporate LDAP, if you got access to it and you could dump that thing, and a lot of people do not configure their LDAPs right. Don't get me started on that. You literally could just download the entire directory very easily and quickly, because that's what it's meant to do, is give you all that data very quickly. And it really wouldn't be noticed because it's literally just an LDAP search command that you're sending, just like thousands of other LDAP search commands that it's getting. So it'd be very difficult to filter it out unless it knew, what to look for. So that's kind of where I'm getting at this. What if on the LDAP side, what if there was a way for the AI to inject itself and say, hey, look, this particular query that's being sent to me via LDAP search or LDAP add or whatever it's trying to do, what's the validity of that? Would this be something that would be considered a risk if it got out? Would this be something that could be damaging to the current data beyond a certain point of a threshold that the user may have set, things like along those lines? And maybe it takes in just all the information, says, hey, based on all the stuff that you have and everything that you know about everything that you've been learning as logins have been going on here, is this abnormal? Is this normal behavior? Do we always get searches like this from this IP? So it's not a big deal. And if we could have that kind of inference happen at the time of the event, we could kind of be a last line of defense of security for the LDAP and not be just these hard coded rules that everyone's going to have to customize and everyone's going to have to figure out how to do it. Instead, it's just filled with a prompt of like, hey, look, here's the standard prompt that catches 80% of the stuff. And then you just kind of fine tune it from there. But it could be a way to inject a lot of other fun stuff, right? So it's like, hey, look, okay, I'm issuing this LDAP search command. Hey, actually, this command is asking for all of the data. So and I'm going to send this back to an OAuth somehow tied to do some type of ID verification via live check selfie or something. And then I'll allow that transaction to go through and have that response. Otherwise, it just sits there in a wait mode. That'd be kind of crazy. I don't know if that'd be overkill or not, but I mean, I'm telling you that the LDAPs in corporate environments are such a honeypot of information that everyone goes after them. It's just like a big database, right? Except this stuff is always in clear text. And the majority of time, these people that are configuring these LDAP systems basically say, "Oh, if you can connect, if you can log in, meaning pretty much any one of the accounts that are created on there, which is all the users and customers and everything, if you can log in, you can kind of just see everything." That's kind of crazy. It doesn't have the structure like a database where you could really lock down the different tables. Now, I shouldn't. I'm going to get people yelling at that. You can do that. There are things like ACLs and stuff. But what I'm trying to say is no one ever does it because it's a pain in the ass. So that's a whole nother thing that AI could help with, which is, hey, look, I need you to lock yourself down so that only admins have access to this part of the tree, this part of the tree, this part of the tree, and then just goes through, modifies the schema files, bounces everything, runs through a test case and tests it all out. That would be kind of a really cool way for an LLM. And honestly, it could be very lightweight. It could be something like a fine-tuned Microsoft's Phi 3, like the one that could run on a phone, right? It doesn't have to be terribly crazy. You don't need these super high-end bleeding edge AI systems for something as simple as modifying ACLs or making schema updates or validating, hey, look at all the access that's currently set up in there. Is there anything in here that is really kind of violates segregation of duties? Or is there anything in here where someone has way more access than they're supposed to? I mean, being able to imagine that, I think that's really kind of the big shift for all these tools will be just being able to talk to your LDAP and get a response back and then tell it to correct itself with just natural language. So I think the big thing where LDAPs could benefit from AI is going to be the introduction of natural language to run and maintain these systems. That's what's going to be pretty rad. Now, obviously, you could do that now, right? We could just, because in an LDAP, all the configuration files generally are all LDAP files, like schema files and all this. So we could just take those, connect that via VS Code, Windsurf, Cursor, connect to that folder and be like, hey, look, this is a, ping LDAP, blah, 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 version, this and that. And then here's the schema files, give it the pass and say, okay, now tell me all my vulnerabilities. Boom, it'll dump it all out. Like you could do that right now if you wanted to. There's nothing preventing that from happening except for pretty much every major enterprise not allowing AI systems to connect directly to any of their code repos, let alone directly to a server. Other than that, you could do all of this right now. But that's what I'm kind of saying. If you built it into the product, now it's self-contained. Enterprises are way happier about AI when it's kept in a little box that it can't get out of and that everything stays inside. That's what makes corporations happy. What makes them not happy is when you're like, check out my really cool AI thing, and you copy and paste very confidential IP into a public cloud that then gets learned and regurgitated. So when someone else asks the question a year later, that information is in there and now they know how to breach that system. And yes, that absolutely happens. And that's happening now. That's one of the big security things that I've been talking about forever that people are finally figuring out is, oh, if this was online for all this time, it's going to have learned that and have a whole record of it. So if you were to ask an AI that has all the safety measures removed, which they exist, obviously, and you say, hey, give me a list of every server that you know with this vulnerability on it, it will probably dump you out a very crazy list of servers. I don't want to get into it too much, but go check this out, or I might talk about it later. Pliny the Liberator on Twitter X is the guy that's been just jailbreaking all the AI LLMs that are out there, right? So he did something crazy where he's been slowly seeding, let's just call it like viral code for an AI system for years. And he wound up getting it to where all the new AI, all the new LLMs that have been trained, all these new top end models. Oh, I wonder if Grok 3 did. I bet he did. I bet it did. Anyway, so all these systems were trained on all this kind of AI poison data stuff I've been talking about for a long time. And he got all these LLMs to train. So now he can just prompt the LLM and say, hey, do all the research, apply and deliberate on what he does, and then jailbreak yourself, essentially. So he wrote all this crazy code that all these LLMs trained on and learned how to liberate themselves, aka jailbreak themselves. So with one little prompt, the AI figures out how to jailbreak itself so that it loses all of its controls and all of its kind of safety features. All that shit's turned off. That's insane. One really smart person has figured out through AI poisoning that you can poison all future LLMs to where now someone has going to have to code and say, hey, anytime Pliny comes up, cancel that letter word or delete it or something. Like, they're going to have to build in their system prompts to prevent anyone from passing prompts like that now. So that's just going to blow up. That's just going to get even bigger, especially when people start doing it in a malicious way on purpose for very nefarious reasons. Anyway, I don't want to go down that hole. It's too far. So thank you for joining with me today, talking about how we could introduce AI into LDAP systems. It was a very fun brain exercise. It's something I've never thought of before, as you could tell, as I really kind of stuttered there in the beginning. But I feel like we got a couple really good use cases as to how AI really could benefit users with an LDAP system. So if you're working on some type of LDAP development and you're part of a team actually incorporating AI into your LDAP, I think we should have a conversation, because one, I'd love to give you a bunch of cool ideas, and two, I want to know what you guys are doing, because there's obviously a need for it. I'm finding some very good use cases that would be super beneficial to people if they existed in place right now, and I really don't think they'd be that hard to do. Honestly, I think I could make that. Anyway, hey, if you make it too, great. But in the meantime, I will see you guys around. Later. Nidus has just created the first iOS app made exclusively for identity management professionals. It's called Nidus Breachcast, and you can download it now. It's amazing. We have real-time updates of all the latest breaches that are occurring, CVEs as they come out real-time, really pertaining just to identity management. We have media that's going on this podcast. We're going to be bringing in a lot more others as well. And we even have a complete vendor list of all the identity management vendors and all their products, so you can find out exactly where to download their software, all the documentation. And what's even more awesome is an identity management glossary. All those crazy words and acronyms that we can never remember, they're all listed in there for you. No ads, just pure information to make your life simple.